Good morning or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Zulliet Cabrera, and I am an undergraduate student at SUNY Uniata.
And I'm Makayla Mather, and I attend University of North Dakota as an undergraduate.
Yes. So this summer, Makayla and I co-worked with our mentors, who were Michael Frothingham, Dr. Vera Schulp-Pelkum, and Dr. Kevin Mahan, on the deformation patterns of the Southern Appalachian, on the Southern Appalachian Mountain subsurface continental crust through seismic anisotropy.
Some of the things we'll be going over just because we'll be saying them a lot. Seismic anisotropy, that is where the PNS waves have a different velocity based on the direction that they're going through. So if we go this way, if you can see my video, and the velocity is just a random 2, and we change it, and velocity changes to 1, that's seismic anisotropy. And that can help us identify different ways and different strikes and dips. And strikes and dips, those are, the strike is the direction that the horizontal plane intersects a rock surface, and the dip is the angle. And you can see in figure B on the right, and so you can, it's kind of small, but you can see the dip angle, it's marked as 30. We also have stereo nets within our data, and it's a way that we can show 3D data on a 2D surface. Since we're all virtual, we can't have computer programming available in Zoom. And so it's just a southern hemisphere, or the lower hemisphere, and you can kind of see that within figure C.
Yes, so a little brief history on the Appalachian Mountains is that they were formed in the tectonic orogeny by 2 major plates colliding in the Paleozoic era, which dated around 480 million years ago. So these plates are known as Laurentia and Gondwana, and as they were moving towards each other, they were met with a few islands in between, known as the Back Arc Basin, which is, you can see in the image. Once they collided with each other, they squished these islands together and closed the Iapetus Ocean in the process. The effect was the formation of the mountains. We specifically looked at the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Inner Piedmont, located in the Southern Appalachians. And the image on the bottom right, you can see that it represents a cross-section of the Appalachians, showing us through its banding that it underwent extreme heat and metamorphism.
And then our project is based off of, or the purpose of our study is to correlate surface structural geology to subsurface geology with seismic anisotropy. And what that means is just looking at the surface, seeing what we can, all the different foliation, bedding, myelinite, those different kind of properties, and seeing if we can correlate that with how the rock layers are underneath. The importance of using our specific area and why we're doing it is because this map hasn't been digitized. And so when you look at the map, it's mostly just, you can see the different faults and if there are more measurements in one specific area, but you can't create all the different averages and different things like that we're able to do. To figure this out, we digitized the map with GMDE, and we were able to show the differences within our stereo nets and visualized it within ArcGIS Pro and compared the different spatial analysis.
So we focused on the Greenville Quadrangle, which is a 1x2 degree map located northeast of Georgia and west of South Carolina. This map is over 7,000 square miles, which with a river that cuts through, representing the boundary of Georgia and South Carolina. It can't even fit the whole state of Connecticut. So as Makayla stated earlier, we used a free program called GMDE to digitize the map. If you take a look at this map from afar, you can barely see any of the measurements plotted. It isn't until you look at the magnified version that you can see one of those measurements. So through a team effort, Makayla and I spent hours upon hours upon hours digitizing a total of 6,467 points.
And so because this area is very large, we split it up with our spatial analysis. On the left, I have the entire map split into 15-minute quadrants, and then on the right, we have 10-kilometer radius around Sesame seismic stations. And within my results, you can see the StereoNet image on the left. And with StereoNets, it kind of shows you if the planes, because this is all the raw data plotted, you can see if all the planes are similar or dissimilar. The ones that are all clumped together on the left, those are all very similar. If they're spread out, that just means that it didn't cooperate very nicely with us. And then on the right, we plotted it based on their average planes for all the different fabric types we mapped. And within the legend, you can see that we have the myelinite, foliation, bedding, lineation, and modeled seismic information. They're all plotted on top of each other. Lineation and bedding, those measurements didn't map as well or similarly to each other. And so you can see those bars pretty nicely with the red and green. That data is data that didn't have as many plots as the foliation did. And that's why it is a little different for all the different averages.
Yeah, so as Makayla stated earlier, I focused on the seismic station portion of this project. In the figure to your left, there are StereoNets of a 10-kilometer radius to each station. Every StereoNet provides the different fabric types that exist in that area. Notice how there's a significant amount of foliation compared to all the other fabric types, but that'll be explained later. Now, looking on the image to the right, this was a map produced through ArcGIS Pro, and this represents the exact same data as the StereoNets, but in a different way. The bars plotted on the map represent specific fabric types. So foliation is blue, lineation is red, bedding is green, and myelinite is gray. Each fabric type is oriented by average strike to view if there are any patterns that exist. In this diagram, we are presented with the modeled and observed seismic anisotropy. So the modeled seismic data, which is shown in black, represents the surface geology. This is from all the points that Makayla and I digitized, which incorporate rock type and the velocities the P and S waves travel through these rocks. The observed data, which is shown in light green or dark green, represents the crustal geology. This is information that we get back from seismic stations. So in the figure to the top right, it shows that a seismic station is in a yellow triangle, and below it there is a cross-section of its crustal geology. The red line shows bumps, which is known as a receiver function, and this tells us a contrast. The contrast that I'm referring to is the boundary by which two rocks meet, allowing us to visualize the subcrustal data.
Within the 15-minute quadrants, we have only plotted foliation and modeled seismic information. Again, that's just because foliation data was so prevalent throughout the entire map. We had over 3,000 points just based off of foliation, and it was within every quadrant. So it's really nice to get those averages. With this, you can see that only 2 of the different foliations don't map well with the modeled seismic averages. And those are kind of in that dark blue area and then this pinkish area in the left-hand side. You can also see how within different colored backgrounds, those are the domain thrust sheets. The bottom right, those map pretty well. And then as you move up the image within the yellow and the brown, those also kind of have the same pattern. And they also, the foliation and the modeled seismic averages, those are all kind of like teetered around the north arrow, as you can see in the top right hand.
Okay, so in this analysis of seismic stations, we are presented with modeled seismic data, foliation, and observed on top of each other. As Makayla stated earlier, foliation is the most consistent fabric throughout the whole Greenville Quadrangle, so that's the only one we use. If we compare these together, we notice something. The foliation appears to be the most similar to the modeled, which is foliation is blue, modeled is black. Throughout the seismic stations, because they're both surface geology based. So we seem to have 13 out of 18 seismic stations that have a correlation. If you compare foliation to the observed, which is the black to the orange one, we have around a 50-50 chance of having a correlation. This is because now we're comparing surface to subsurface geology. We have around 8 out of 14 seismic stations that show a correlation. Lastly, for the modeled and observed, which is the black and the orange, we have even less correlation between these two, because again, we are comparing surface to subsurface geology. We only identified 6 out of 14 seismic stations to be similar. Now, if you take a closer look at two specific stations, we appear to see that there's only one that has a correlation and the other does not. So if you look at the Z9D19 station, none of the bars line up with each other. This could be due to the fact of location. Looking at the place the station is located, we see that there are various different thrust sheets around. The lack of correlation could just be the fact that the surface geology, the surface's thrust sheet, which is the Richard Russell thrust sheet, is different from the subcrust thrust sheet. Yes, it could be one that is around, like the yellow or the pink one, which are Young Harris, or green Smoky, and it could also possibly either be the light blue one, which is the Helen thrust sheet. So the fact that the Appalachian Mountains was a landmass that was formed through extreme heat and pressure makes this interpretation completely plausible. Now looking at the other seismic station, Z9W315, we seem to have a strong correlation with foliation, observed, and model data. This could mean that the same thrust sheet exists within the subsurface geology.
For conclusions, our methods for comparing the results, the modeled results do compare with surface fabric within the 1 by 2 degree quadrangle, whether it's the 15-minute quads broken up or the 10-kilometer radius around the seismic stations. With comparing the observed to modeled data, it's a little more difficult to try to predict it, just because there's so many different rock types and domains. If you have 4 different domains within a 10-kilometer radius of a seismic station, that's going to get a little complicated. For the future, our colleagues will be looking at how fabric types change within thrust sheets and spatial data sets, just based on, instead of breaking it up by the 15-minute quadrants, it'll be broken up by the domains.
Finally, we would like to acknowledge our mentors, the National Science Foundation, RESESS interns, UNAVCO staff, and everyone that showed up today. Thank you. This is a slide that we show our citations to the figures that we use in their presentation. And any questions?
And you guys can add us on LinkedIn if you'd like with your QR code scanner.